What up? It's your boys. I'm Trey. That's Kevin. And that is Coach Adam Brown. We're here for, guess what? Florida State didn't even have a game last weekend. And we love you guys so much that it's still another episode of the Triple Option Special Edition for all of you guys, Mythbusters. That's right. One of them's the one with the beret. The other is the other ginger guy. I am the crash test dummy. And it works out perfectly. Trios saluting trios, because what we did is in the off season, we bided our time. On the bye week, we got some topics that of things that are interesting to you and interesting to us. Some of the 5 most hotly contested topics in Florida State fandom and conversations at the moment. And we're going to take a look at them to confirm whether they are true or whether they are myths. Kevin has compiled all of the figures. Adam's got the best eyes in the biz, and we're going to be looking at film. We're going to let you guys know if the myth is confirmed, busted, or inconclusive, because sometimes you just don't know. Football's got a lot of variables, but we're going to try to solve them all for you. Kevin, I am extremely excited. I have never busted a myth before. I am so stupid that I just believe all the myths that are told to me without even questioning them. So I'm ready to bust a myth for the first time in my life, man.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm excited for this one. It hits the scientist in my heart. Mythbusters was my favorite show growing up.
Absolutely.
I hate numbers.
Adam, we've already got a myth. Science is stupid. Adam agrees. Kevin's busted it.
Confirmed.
Oh my God, I can't wait. We're gonna get a little scientific method, a hypothesis in there, some conclusions. Bring out your 3-sided panel board and
Somebody
get ready.
Get me the Dewey Decimal System.
That's right, because this is just like the night before the science fair, and we're gonna do it all at once right before the assignments due, boys. Let's go to the first myth. And like I said, I'll pretty much you guys sourced all 5 of these from like the Knowles 24/7 message boards, and just it's stuff that's really front of Florida State fan minds, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way it seems. It's kind of what we've consistently been hearing, and I think they brought up a lot of interesting topics that I don't know if we're even settled on yet, even talking before the show. So
we weren't. There was actually a lot of inconclusivity before we even started. So let's see if the data presented will sway each one of our fabulous scientific analysts. Myth number 1, Florida State can't play zone defense at all.
Ooh.
Zip nada, they stink.
At all.
Kevin?
Yeah, so I've got a few things here. So this is going to be a point of contention with both AB and I, because I think we see these numbers and we don't necessarily believe them. So just to start off with, this is kind of what an independent third party in Pro Football Focus has. I don't know how visible that is, but these are the coverages that Fuller's run in 2019 at Memphis, then 2020 at Florida State, 2021 and 2022. You can see this top line here is cover 4. He's kind of always hovered 35-40% of snaps cover 4. He's really heavy cover 4 last year. I felt like they kind of simplified things to make things easier for people. What you do see is in this final season, there's a big jump up in cover 1. It's still not being run as often as quarters cover 4 according to their numbers, but you do see how there's a significant increase in cover 1, which is inherently a man coverage. And so, yeah, AB, how do you feel about these numbers? Do you generally agree with them, or because we've thought we've been seeing a lot of what's called 2-man, but PFS kind of disagrees with us.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I don't feel like I've seen as much cover 3 as there potentially. First off, I don't love that chart. That chart is very wonky to me, but that's okay.
Too many lines.
Way too many lines. I don't know where the hell we're going here. No, yeah, I don't. I feel like they've been in a lot of 2-man, but then when you watch it back, and recently it seems like they've been rotating down a lot more. I don't know how much cover 3 they've been running. I feel like they've been running a lot of cover 1 with some robber stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, so I don't know about all the cover 3 that they're suggesting is on there, or frankly, all the amount of quarters that they are saying is on there. We do know that they run a lot of quarters. I feel like they run a lot of man match stuff though, and we talked about it a little bit before we started. I don't know if you want to explain what man match is and why it really is a zone principle inside of a man principle.
Yeah, so this is probably my favorite. I'll kind of get a better view for us here. This is kind of my favorite example that I have. This is the reason I'm using Memphis is because it's got the all 22 angle, which you kind of need to see for these safeties. So at the beginning of this play, SMU kind of motions this wide receiver outside. So what you're seeing is trips to one side of the field. So three receivers to the top here, a single receiver to the bottom. And Memphis, which is coached by Adam Fuller at the time, is playing what's called stress coverage, but in essence, it's a man match coverage. So basically, it's gonna kind of look like man as the play progresses, but these defenders are kind of playing. It's technically called a man match. So they're gonna wait for the receivers to declare and then pick them up in man coverage. So technically, I think PFF, since it doesn't have a man match category, I think it calls this zone. But oftentimes it looks like man coverage, especially in trips, because they'll play this backside safety, the safety to the lone receiver. They'll play him so he kind of has eyes to the trips, and they'll leave this wide receiver, this cornerback, essentially in man coverage, man everywhere he goes. So it's not ever really as black and white anymore as zone and man coverage. So you kind of see a little bit of both in this play. So you can kind of see immediately these guys aren't picking them up in man more than they're kind of waiting for these receivers to declare if they're going to go in or out. So he would take the first guy in and he would take the first guy out, assuming he's going to the flats. But down here, it's basically man coverage. SMU kind of takes the shot against man coverage. This is another example. I probably should have showed this first. So this is the simplest man match coverage. Basically, these two defenders share these two receivers, and it looks like man, right? They've got their eyes on the opponent. There's not really much safety help. But you can see after the snap, the receivers kind of switch places. Here in a second, and the defenders, instead of following their man, they switch, and that's man match. This is the simplest man match. It's called banjo. You'll often see, I think Florida State still does this, where they kind of make this little hand signal to each other. I think they've probably changed the hand signal, but that's just them communicating that, hey, we're going to switch these two receivers in case they do some sort of switch rub route, which is fairly common on the goal line.
I'm trying to pull up something real quick.
Kevin,
here.
are you seeing a lot of that type of stuff that you highlighted from Memphis being run by Florida State today under Adam Fuller?
Yeah, so just to give kind of an example of what that looks like today and Florida State's current outlook, they're still running a lot of that. So most of their offense, even when it looks like they're running man, so we would say if we're like in our film review at post game, we would probably call this cover 2 man, because that's what it looks like here. But most likely the discrepancy between PFF and what we're seeing is they would consider this some sort of match quarters, probably, which is kind of odd to think about because it doesn't look like a true cover 4 with these corners dropping deep. But you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So NC State knows we run a lot of these match concepts. So they run this wide receiver inside and run a wheel behind him. And this means that this corner is basically playing banjo with this linebacker. So you can kind of think of it as a banjo, like I showed you in the goal line view earlier, where he's going to be taking, the corner's got to take the first guy outside. So if this receiver releases inside, which he does, that means the corner has to let go of him. Here you can see he kind of follows him like he's playing man coverage, and he doesn't recognize the running backs releasing outside, and he's slow to peel off. and NC State gets a big completion, and it's a broken coverage essentially.
But that's a broken coverage that's actually a man coverage that you think PFF is grading as a zone, correct?
So I think it really depends on who you ask. It's called a man match coverage. It's the closest thing to zone that Fuller's ever run. And it's actually the closest thing to zone that most people run. Most people aren't just running true spot drop zones anymore. They're doing this. It's a way to have kind of the best of both worlds.
Or in this specific play, the worst of those two good worlds that you're trying to conglomerate, because that's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. That's why AZ Thomas probably they didn't want to put him in the game until several games in, because this is the communication that takes a little bit of time to build, but it's something that needs to be fixed.
So, Kevin, go back to that chart a little bit. So, for the benefit of the people that aren't watching the video with us, that are the audio only, we go back to that, because right now it's got PFF. It always says that top one is the PFF quarters coverage, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the quarters.
So for the people that are looking at that, in 2021, Florida State ran that coverage according to PFF like 44% of the time. They say that that's still our most run coverage at like 36%. What you can tell, and we think that that's actually a little off. We think a lot of that stuff is more man-based than how PFF's logging it, correct?
Yeah, it really depends on how you want to categorize it. So I think they're not wrong calling it quarters, but in essence, it's going to act a lot more like it's a match man in essence.
Okay, so to demonstrate the point that I think a lot of us have seen on the field in 2021, go pull that chart up one more time. In 2021, Florida State was running that cover one, which is that straight man. Let's see, about 14% of the time, just in a 1 year jump from a guy that's normally run it in that sub 20% range his entire career. Now that's pumped up to like 27 or 28%.
Yeah.
So that straight man, they are calling more than Adam Fuller has ever called in his entire career. So I think that kind of bears a lot of the things that we're seeing on the field.
Let me take it a little bit further, because they may be calling these things, but calling it and then being able to run it. I mean, the question was, are they able to teach it essentially?
Yeah. That's the question.
I want to go through your top four defenders, or your top four corners, and their national percentage or their national rank for completion percentage against as a primary defender. Jerry Jones ranks 503rd in the country at 46.7%. Renardo Green ranks 865th in the country at 55.6%.
That's surprising.
Kevin Knowles at 886 in the country at 56%. And Amarion Cooper at 1,859th in the country at 83.8 or 83.3%. So when they're the primary defender and they're targeted, 503, 865, 886, 1859.
Out of how many?
Now, there's thousands. Now, what I'm going to say is there's some guys in there with zeros that you would eliminate. Elias Ricks for Alabama is number one. Technically, he's number one overall at 13.3%. You're going to get some snap count numbers in there that are going to throw some things off. There's some guys in there with one primary defense. You know what I mean? Like,
however, the fact that all of those
not a good
guys
place
are,
to be.
No.
Not great. Not really where you want to be. So let's see. Jerry Jones has had 15 attempts against as the primary defender, 7 completions against, 8 incompletions. So Renardo Green's had 27 attempts, 15 completions. Kevin Knowles, 25 attempts, 14 completions. Amarion Cooper, 18 attempts, 15 completions.
So let's go back to the myth, or the myth that maybe is not a myth.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So Florida State can't play zone defense. We've seen from the numbers, whether even if PFF categorized all that stuff correctly, Adam Fuller is calling more zone defense than he has more man defense than he has his entire career. That's a fact, no matter how they categorize it. Yep. And a lot of the stuff that they're categorizing is zone, it's effectively a lot of man. So he's calling it more than he ever has. I don't know if we'd have to run the numbers, but I can't imagine that Adam Fuller has had 4 primary defensive backs worse than the ones that are playing right now. It collectively as a unit, those numbers are god awful. So
Yeah.
guys, the myth that Florida State can't play zone defense, is it confirmed or busted?
Myth busted. They can't play any defense.
Oh God, all of the above. All right.
I mean, it doesn't matter when your top four corners, and I didn't include AZ Thomas, which perhaps I should have, but your top four corners are 503, 865, 886, and 1859. Don't talk to me about coverage, because that tells me you're not defending anybody in pass coverage.
What do you think, Kevin? Adam busted that myth in probably the worst way possible for Florida State fans, because it's not that they can't play zone, they can't play any. What do you think about the myth? Can they not play zone defense? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a weird distinction to make in modern football, especially with the man match just dominates the game. They're running man match, they're running straight man. Very few teams run spot drop zones because you're just a liability in spot drop zones. Decent quarterbacks will just tear you up. So, yeah, I think that's true. I don't necessarily think that man zone is making a difference. I think your corners have regressed this season, and I think it's the main thing holding your defense back currently.
Yeah. Yards per completion. All
How
right.
much? Oh God,
Yards per completion
too?
against his primary defender. Let me sort this out here a little bit. Let me sort and see where our national ranks are. This is great podcasting, I know.
Oh, it's absolutely fine, because I'll vamp, because that's what a pro does.
The little circle is just going woo.
No,
woo,
it's
woo,
Well, yeah.
woo.
Adam's laptop is overheating right now, but yeah,
Love
it's
that.
very rare to have a myth both busted
Right, here we
and
go.
confirmed at the same
Here we go.
time.
We got it. Kevin Knowles. Kevin Knowles at 784th in the country, 9.1 yards per completion against as the primary defender. 9.1 yards. Amarion Cooper, 9.6 yards, ranks 879th in the country. Jarian Jones, 1,069, 10.6 yards per completion against as the primary defender. And Renardo Green at 10.8.
Which wouldn't kill you, but they're giving up completions half the time. So just throw at one of those two guys on first and second down, and you're guaranteed a first down, essentially. Pick any defense, pick any cornerback in the Florida State defense right now, throw at them twice, you'll complete one, and it'll be for 9 yards or more. That's what those numbers mean, correct?
Yeah, and what's the crazy thing is that
out of control, guys.
Florida State's they've been playing their safeties pretty conservatively, even in those coverages.
You guys keep talking. I'm going to go back to 2021.
But no, Kevin, like you said, those numbers are egregious, and that's even with right now a defensive scheme, or at least like a shell that Florida State's playing, that's designed to protect those guys.
Yeah, they are protecting them, and it's not going to show up in the cover four. The safeties are playing at about 15 yards as opposed to 10 yards last year. If you just go back and watch the stats, they're pulling Akeem Dent and Jamie Robinson out of the box a lot of times because they really want to give help to these corners.
Did you find some more fun nuggets to digest, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, they were much worse defensive yardage wise last year, or yards per completion last year, like significantly worse.
So this is actually an improvement, is what you're saying?
As far as yards per completion, but it makes sense because you're playing with two safeties over the top quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, so I'd say
think of the number of explosive, and this is going to lead into another conversation we're going to have myth wise, bend but don't break defense. But you're going to give up more air yards. You're going to give up longer completions without two safeties over the top. All right, so last year, yeah. All right, here's significant regression. Kevin Knowles was at 810 last year, 53.5% completion percentage against. Amarion Cooper, smaller sample size, but 29.4% against. Renardo Green, I won't include him. Jarian Jones has actually improved quite a bit. He was 63.6% completion percentage last year. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, well, it's a mixed bag as far as year to year. I think it's pretty conclusive that that unit is playing very terribly. I don't think that that's a
not
mixed
well.
bag. So I will say this myth is confirmed. And like you said, it's busted. It's confirmed because they can't play zone defense, but those numbers say Florida State's cornerbacks, it doesn't matter the coverage. They're playing bad no matter what Adam Fuller calls. So I'd say that one confirmed across the board. Let's move on to number 2. Adam teased it very well. Florida State's defensive philosophy right now is bend, but don't break. Not necessarily what's happening. We'll get to that. But the strategy, the philosophy that Adam Fuller is trying to employ right now is bend, but don't break. Fact or fiction?
I think it's important we define bend but don't break.
Do it now.
To me, a bend but don't break defense is one that does not pressure, does not blitz, relies on a front 4 rush, plays a shell coverage over the top, says you're not going to give up any explosives. We're going to let you run the football. You can drive the football, but when we get inside the 20, we're going to lock you up and make you kick field goals.
Kevin, do you agree?
That's what it means to me.
Right. Okay. I think that sounds pretty cogent. Kevin, what do you think about that definition? Does that jive with you before we start talking about whether Florida State's trying to actually do that or not?
Yeah, I think in general, bend but don't break. Yeah, you're gonna keep 2 safeties back. You're gonna, yeah, I think that meshes with everything I would say.
Okay, so we've got the definition of bend but don't break down. Kevin, is Adam Fuller trying to employ that strategy, or is he trying to do something else, and the lack of execution is making it look like that?
Well, the first thing we just noted was the amount of cover 1 snaps has gone up, right?
Correct. Significantly.
I think that's an important thing to start off with. We're talking about playing a 2 shell safety look, not giving up explosives. You're playing a lot more cover 1 now. So if you're playing more cover 1, naturally your coverages are a little more aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay. So that, I think that's good, something to note, and it's more than he's done his entire career. So in that aspect, and we think we know why he's doing it, but that is more aggressive. That lends itself more to it's not so much passive as some people think. Kevin, what else do you have? Because that's a good point to note, Adam.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna just go ahead and list everything that says that they're not, because I do want to preface this, and I know we'll get back to it. Every stat tells you that they're playing bend but don't break.
Mm-hmm.
And even the eye test kind of feels that way.
Yes,
they are about exactly in the middle of college football in blitz rate. So that kind of suggests that maybe they're not totally bend but don't break, but they're not. I wouldn't classify them as aggressive either. They're kind of that stat kind of paints them in a picture of being rather neutral.
Yeah, and that's with an increase in blitzing over the past couple games, right? That's taken a while for that to kind of ramp up.
And year over year, they have blitzed more this season than last.
So they're 74th in the country as far as defensive pressure percentage, 30.8%. Like I said, I mean, they're 74th in the country. I think what's killing them, I don't think they want to be a bend but don't break defense. I don't think that that's what they want to be. And maybe the numbers play out that they are because they don't have a lot of faith in their corners. But their sack percentage is 8.9%. They're 17th in the country there. They're 32nd in the country in defensive sacks at 19. But the opponent's time. Hold on a second here. Come on.
That's a high sack percentage. I don't feel like they get a lot of heat on the quarterback though for that much sacks.
But they're 113th in the country in opponent time to throw at 2.89 seconds.
That's crazy. And they're what?
108th in the country in opponent time to pressure, 2.59 seconds. So this is a really weird freaking defense.
To be honest with you, if those are the metrics, to me, it sounds like it's almost like turnover luck. Now, God, turnover luck, right? We don't know anything about that because we're not getting turnovers. But it's almost like to me, it's analogous to turnover luck. I don't think Florida State's going to be getting that many sacks if they're not getting consistent pressure all the time. Like, to me, that's going to regress to the mean, right?
Right.
Yeah. And what'd you say their time to pressure was?
2.59 seconds.
Where does that rank?
108th in the country.
Yeah, so you're blitzing the 68th 8th most in the country, and you're getting pressure. The time to pressure is above 100th. So something's not translating. So even when you're blitzing, you're not getting pressures. I found the stat. They're blitzing almost 10% more than last year. Almost a quarter of the snaps this season have been blitzes, 25 versus 16.
Some of the teams that rank around them as far as opponent time to pressure, Oregon at 2.6 seconds, Kentucky at 2.62, Syracuse at 2.68, which seems a little odd.
Now,
I think of them as
question.
a high pressure defense.
All right. Now, question, because this is
mhm.
a question, this is a myth about philosophy.
Yeah.
Are those lack of pressure statistics due to some of like the mobile quarterbacks that Florida State played at the beginning of the year and somehow with like, hey, it's a mush rush, just kind of let it all get in front of you, we don't get burned? Or is it due to having Fabian Lovett out for most of the year and having Jared Verse hurt? And that's the reason why they're not getting a ton of pressure, is because they've had dinged up and backups on their defensive line.
I think your answer has to be all of the above, right? You've been missing Fabian Lovett since the fourth quarter of the second game. So that hurts you. He's your best defensive lineman. Jared Verse went out against Louisville. He hasn't been 100% since. That's your best pass rusher. So you've immediately lost your best defensive lineman, your best pass rusher. That's going to impact what you want to do up front. But yeah, they faced Jaden Daniels, who scrambled all over the place against them. You face Malik Cunningham. You face Sam Hartman, who you're not thinking is a big time rusher as far as scrambling, but with the slow mesh, you think about the amount of time that he holds the ball in that ride and then makes his decisions. So
he's opportunistic as well.
Yeah, I think that the pressure, the time to pressure and that kind of stuff can be a little bit misleading, slightly, in my opinion, with what they've faced. I do think it's interesting that Kev, they're 68th in the nation now at blitzing.
Yeah, in percentage of plays where they send a blitz.
Right. I mean, I think that suggests that they're trying to heat things up somewhat. It doesn't seem like they're fully committed to it, because I do think that they are obviously looking at what's going on with their secondary and realizing they've got a problem with the secondary and their ability to cover people down the field. So they're trying to pick and choose their opportunities to pressure. The problem is they're not successfully getting home with those pressures all the time, even though they are getting sacks in games and are giving up big plays. Not big plays, but they're giving up 8-9 yards per completion when they are getting throws against them. I don't. It's just
they're not affecting the quarterback's timing a lot.
It's just not a great defense. I feel like it's unfair to try to lock this into, is it a bend but don't break and all this stuff. It's just not really good.
Now, Kevin, I think if we want to talk about philosophy, because I think that's fine, Adam. A lot of it might be resembling a bend but don't break, but that's just mostly due to poor execution rather than philosophy. But I mean, what does Adam Fuller look like in the past statistically? Does he look like a more play it all in front of you, conservative bend but don't break defensive coordinator, or is it just looking that way at Florida State because of injuries and personnel? Because then I think that's how you answer that question.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very valuable question. So I'm going to spend a second and kind of find the Memphis numbers, because when he was brought in, it was very much everybody was talking about him being a very aggressive offensive coordinator.
Being an offensive minded defensive coordinator. Yeah, right. There was a lot of that when he came in, a lot of that mantra that that's what he was going to be. And you throw 2020 away, 2021 they didn't blitz. They didn't blitz a ton.
Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas and things like that too. So and
it feels like they've going into 2022 and they tried to ride with that same philosophy. We're going to let our front four eat. They talk about the front porch all the time. We're going to try to stop the run. We're going to blitz. We're going to rush with four. But we saw that not working, and you lose Lovett, you lose Verse to extent. They've adapted now, and they've started to bring more pressure. The problem is the pressure's not getting there. They're not bringing it all the time. They're not defending guys well in the secondary. So even when they do bring pressure, the pass is still getting off.
So
which could be a sign of a team that doesn't run that a lot and has had to
Right.
do that out of necessity.
Yeah.
so
And in their red zone, they're horrible. I mean, they're just not good in the red zone either, which it's like, yeah, you're bend but don't break, but you just give it up in the red zone too. So
Yeah, you're just on your back, legs spread open, just giving it up all over town. It's not great. Kevin, what were you saying? Did you find those Memphis numbers?
yeah, so Memphis blitz on 35% of dropbacks compared to the 25% number that Florida State's at this season. So they were in the top 25 in the country. They were 27th in the country in blitz rate. His final year or his only year at Memphis. So was significantly more aggressive at Memphis. I think they feel like they should be able to lean on their defensive line. And honestly, I think having Lovett out and Verse kind of dinged up, I think that really has messed with kind of their preseason plan and how they designed this defense to work.
I agree. So, in the second myth, Florida State's defensive philosophy is bend but don't break. You can either confirm or deny, and I guess that's based on whether you think it's due to design or by necessity. But Adam, their preferred defensive philosophy is bend but don't break, based on what they've got right now.
I think there's probably more data that I would like to see, but I think that I don't think it's their preferred scheme based on the amount of uptick in cover one that we're seeing them run.
Yeah.
Okay. So you bust that myth. You don't
Well,
think that they want to play that. It looks like that because of poor execution, you think?
I do. I
Okay.
think it's poor execution. I think it's losing, not having Lovett, not having Verse available.
And based on what Fuller's done in the past too, Adam, I think that would lend some value to your answer. Go ahead, Kevin.
So when people say that, so these are the two stats that I think kind of summarize what people see, right? Florida State is 20th in yards per play, but 93rd in EPA per snap, which means EPA is a metric that tries to quantify every play by number of points it adds to the final score. So for some reason, the yards aren't adding up to the plays. And I think when you dive into like success rate, that's really where you start to see it kind of show itself. So Florida State is 84th in defensive success rate and 20th in yards per play. So that means that while they're not giving up a ton of yards, especially not in explosives, they are consistently giving up those like 3-4 yards almost like more often, right? So they're not giving up the 20s, but they're giving up 4-4-4, and that's kind of shown in the defensive success rate versus yards per play.
Kevin, to me, what that means is that opposing offenses don't need as many plays to score a ton of points against FSU.
Yeah.
Right? That's what that means basically. Because it's you're not going to get 40, but it's a guaranteed 5 to 12 every single time they snap the ball.
And is that a philosophy that you're okay giving up 5 to 12?
No, God, no. Nobody would, or else come on.
I have a hard time buying that.
So I'm with you. So what do you think, Kevin? What do you think? Do you think that they're trying to employ a bend but don't break, or it's just kind of the best with what they got?
Yeah, I think it's the best with what they got. But I think this is almost encouraging because once you get Lovett back, there's potential that right now teams can run the ball for 3-4 yards a pop on you. Your linebackers are good enough to kind of keep it from breaking deep, but like breaking long runs consistently. But once Fabian Lovin's back, you kind of can cement the interior of that defensive line, maybe get more stops, because right now your EPA, your success rate is getting destroyed because on first and second down, teams can run for 3 yards on you every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to wreck their yards per play because it's only 3 yards. But if I run for 3 yards on first, run for 3 yards on second, those are 2 successful plays because now I'm in 3rd and 4. So not having a interior defensive line you can rely on is, I think, one of the big reasons why the success rate is so bad.
Okay. So we think that myth's busted and we expect some more aggressive play on the back half. If that myth is truly busted based on some of the things you said and what Adam Fuller's done in the past, we will see. So that's our verdict on that one. Number 3, Florida State's putrid, just lack of takeaways is more on the players or more? I'm going to say, just so we can do myth busting, Florida State's lack of takeaways is more on the players than the scheme. Myth or not?
I think we can say more on the players and then on the scheme.
Yeah.
I can say I think we confirm that based on solely those numbers we talked about with the D-backs earlier.
Yeah, they're just giving up
when
completions.
When you're giving up that kind of completion percentage, and look, maybe it's not the scheme, maybe it's the teaching.
That's what I was going to say. Now, players, it's not all crapping on the players. It's
maybe
technique.
The question's flawed because the question should be, is it the coaching, not the scheme? You know what I mean? Instead of the scheme.
So let's amend that. Because we do think it's the players based on that. Now, do you think Florida State's lack of takeaways is more on the technique or more on the ability of the player, the talent level? That's what I think is more interesting.
So I do want to bring up something now that we're on that topic.
Ooh,
and this is kind of how I think this kind of drives some conversation that we try to have about how they want to play their corners. So if you watch this corner, they're in kind of a match quarters type look, and he plays a lot of what's called solo coverage, like I said earlier, where this backside safety is going to keep his eyes to the trip side instead of the lone receiver side. So in essence, this is just straight man coverage, despite the fact that they're playing what is considered a zone play. This guy's technically in man coverage. So they do what's called mirror technique a lot. So mirror technique differentiates itself from jam technique because instead of him immediately reaching out and putting his hands on a receiver, he tries to mirror him with his feet. So it's by definition kind of a less aggressive way. When you jam, you put yourself kind of in a situation where you might be out in front of your toes, where you could, like a good receiver can kind of head fake you and get you to kind of overcommit with your hands. So this is kind of a safer way to play man coverage. But it also means that it's a little bit softer, right? You can see that this free release means that this kind of hitch route here, this comeback, it's a timing route, and he doesn't throw off the timing. It's just the way they're taught to do it. It keeps them from giving the shots over the top, but it also means that these timing routes, these short underneath routes are probably a little bit easier for opposing teams.
So Adam, what do you think about that? So the lack of takeaways, technique or talent? Because to me, what Kevin would say there is that doesn't really put a DB in a great position to make a takeaway, Kevin. Is that what you think about that style of defense?
I think good DBs can
break
get
on that.
takeaways. Yeah, can break on that. Like can know that's coming. So in essence, I think that their scheme that they're trying not to get beat over the top, and that might restrict your takeaways.
Yeah, listen. This is what I'm going to be wishy-washy on. I think it's a bit of both. You're 68th in the country. How do you create takeaways? Being pressure-minded, getting after guys. We talked about where they stand as far as the amount of time it takes for the ball to come out of the quarterback's hand, the amount of time in the pocket. But then we also talk about the completion percentage against these cornerbacks. So I think there's some wiggle room in there to say, yeah, we don't pressure teams very much. We don't come after you a whole lot. And when we're coming after you right now, we're not that good at it. And we're giving you time to throw the football because we're missing Fabian Lovett, we're missing Jared Verse or whatever. But at the same time, we're playing passive man coverage on the outside. So we're not really getting up in your grill. We're not really pressuring you out here. So we're going to say it's okay if you could complete some of these underneath throws and have a high success rate at that. But then again, we'll put you in position to break on some of these shorter throws. You got to be successful enough to go do it.
That sounds more like scheme stuff to me. We threw scheme out the window, and then it feels like scheme's getting back into it.
Maybe it's
complicated. Yeah,
it is complicated. These answers are never easy. I mean, Let me see. So hold on a second. I was just pulling something up here.
Well, while
So
you
they're
pull that up,
they're 94th in the country in passes that are intercepted per pass attempt, 2.1%. You look at like Louisville's at 5%. NC State's at 4.8%. Illinois leads the country at 5.7%. So, yeah. Jeez Louise.
now, Kevin,
These
what
are ugly numbers. I'm
historically?
sorry, I'm looking at these numbers. They're
You're
just
fine.
ugly
You're
looking.
fine. Historically, Adam Fuller, what if his defenses, have they excelled in takeaways before this year? I mean, I think that's something to look at
I
too
mean,
if you're talking about technique, scheme, or talent.
FSU was 23rd in the country in takeaways last season at 1.6 a game. So
Market difference. What about Memphis in 2019?
Yeah, I'm pulling that up right now.
yeah, I don't have the Memphis stat on me right now, but
I'll get it for it. They were 61st in the country as far as interceptions per attempt at 2.7%. So they were better. They were middle of the pack. For reference, Florida State was 120th that year.
So that lends something to maybe there's a player issue.
I think so too. So that's what I was saying. If it's one of those things where historically that's not been a strength of his, like it would for like Iowa's defensive coordinator, like a hallmark of that guy's scheme is to get takeaways, and how he does it, that's his own special sauce. But Adam Fuller has been at least middle of the pack and sometimes better, like you said, 23rd with Florida State. Now
Memphis was 38th in the country that year. They had, interesting enough, Florida State was 28th in the country.
What year was that, Adam?
2019.
Which
Memphis had 11 interceptions and recovered 21 fumbles.
My goodness. No, that's just a disruptive defense. It's so different from what we've seen here that I'm with you.
But the Florida State defense was better that year. That 2019 Florida State defense was better at taking the ball away.
Well, then that's when you look at all the other metrics. We're talking about takeaway. Absolutely. But it's just, it doesn't seem to be that's a hallmark of Adam. How would it be a hallmark of any defensive coordinator?
It's so lucky. I mean, there's so much luck involved when it comes to takeaways. When you start talking about turnovers, interceptions, do I think that they put these guys in good position to create interceptions? No. I think they're very passive. We've been very critical of the way they play press man outside. It's very passive. They're passive in a lot of things they ask these corners to do. I think that does not lend itself to creating turnovers. You create turnovers. Yes, it's luck. There's a lot of luck involved, but you create them. You create them through pressure. You create them through making mistakes, getting timing off for quarterbacks and things like that. They don't do that. That's not what they want to do schematically.
Okay. So myth, Florida State's lack of takeaways is due to technique more than anything else. You got to bust something. So either confirm or go inconclusive.
Yeah, I think it's inconclusive personally.
Okay. But it's a mix of all that stuff. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I would probably say, yeah, it's inconclusive. I think the hard thing for me is I genuinely think Cooper and Knowles have taken a step back this season, and it really makes you question kind of the coaching. Like, yeah, there's problems with the talent and with the players.
Health, yeah, obviously health.
Right,
yeah, dinged up, but it's such a clear regression for a lot of these guys.
Yep.
And they're not doing anything revolutionary. They're not calling really complicated plays, but Knowles is getting lost in coverage. AZ is getting lost in coverage. Like it's there is a sense that they're playing kind of passive. There is a sense that the players are maybe not the most talented, but like it doesn't feel like, it feels like to me, if it's a talent problem, it's also a development problem for the cornerbacks.
All right, so let's look at a sample set. Clemson had what, like 4 turnovers in the first half, or in the game against.
It was god awful. Yeah,
in the game against Syracuse. Syracuse is not very good at creating interceptions. They're not great at creating pressure, but they put a lot of guys up in the box and they seem to come after you. They're not passive defensively, I would say. I don't have their numbers up because I'm not digging into them. So I don't have their stuff in front of me, but what did Syracuse do to create 4 turnovers or whatever it was from DJ that Florida State couldn't do?
Opposing quarterbacks look more comfortable against FSU than they should due to the talent level on this team, in my opinion. And I think that's very easy to be seen.
I tend to agree with you.
Right.
And that's why, like, I don't want to give Adam Fuller a pass and say, or Marcus Woodson or whoever, I don't want to give anybody a pass because I do think there's a scheme-based aspect of lack of just in your face, I'm going to come get you. I'm going to knock you off your spot, knock you off your rhythm.
Disrupt your timing.
With this defense that I see from other defenses like Syracuse. Syracuse runs a 3-3-5. NC State, they run, they're doing their 3-3 stuff. These teams are coming after you, and they may not always get there, but they're forcing you. They are forcing units. And I don't see that from Florida State. They're very passive. They just seem content a lot of times. And, I think we busted the bend but don't break thing because I don't think that that's what they want to be, but they're not a come get you defense either.
I think they really rolled the dice this season on Lovett, Briggs, Verse, and McClendon to get a pass rush.
Yeah.
And they're getting sacks, but not getting pressure. And I think
it failed to an extent, and it's killing them now, and they're stuck to some degree.
Yep.
But I don't think they're great at corner either.
Yeah.
I don't think the players they have out there are guys that are going to go create turnovers.
Yep.
This is the one I'm most perplexed on.
All right, let's move on. It's inconclusive, but it's not a lot of fun stuff. Move on to the offense.
No positivity.
Yeah, so the offense is the offensive struggles to convert in the red zone and short down and distances are things that can be fixable in the final 5 games of the year. Fact, myth, or not. Fact, fiction, myth, bust, or not.
If I got to hear one more person talk about how great the run game was against Clemson because they ran for 200 yards against Clemson, which was great. But man, I mean, didn't we show all the film where Clemson was like, here, have a 5-man, 6-man box and do what you're going to do?
Yep.
They're not successful in the red zone because when the team, Kev's got the numbers, and I really think it boils this down. This doesn't need to be a long conversation at all. When a team commits 8 guys in the box, this team can't run the football consistently.
Well, Kevin, he's teed it up. What do you think?
Yeah, so I found some stats that were just kind of jarring. So when teams aren't trying to stop the run, when teams are kind of in a neutral coverage compared to other teams in the country. So when there's 8 or less in the box, so this is every team in the country when there's 8 or less in the box, when you have a decent running situation, Florida State ranks 7th in the country in EPA per rush. So that's estimated points added per rush. That means it's effectively an efficiency metric. So Florida State is the 7th most efficient running team in the country with less than 8 players in the box. As soon as a team knows Florida State's going to run, so this is in your 3rd and shorts, your 4th and shorts, your red zone situations. As soon as that happens, Florida State is 105th in the country.
What was the first stat? They go from what to 105th?
7th.
So when a team is not accounting,
not great.
When a team can't account for every gap, they're 7th in the country. When a team can, they're 105th.
I think there's part of that might be on the tight ends.
Absolutely.
When you go heavy, when you have to really line up and hit someone in the mouth, that means you have to put tight ends in the box, tight ends in the game. And now your tight ends are up on their linebackers, their extra linebackers. And I think you're losing that battle. I think that's a big factor.
So when there's a lot of space, when the field's not compressed, when Mike can use different formations to create extra gaps, use Jordan Travis as an extra runner, have some read plays to have some of the guys unblocked. When he can get creative when there's a lot of space, this is a very effective and explosive running team. But when everything gets compressed, when it's more kind of old school Adam Brown, dude on dude football, they get annihilated. Is that what those numbers would mean to a big dumb layman like myself?
Yeah, that's the way it looks.
Pretty
And
much.
So
to
based
me-
on that, go ahead.
To me, I think that means that you don't go heavy. I know that
Yeah.
sounds silly, but I think that means that 3rd and 2 from the goal line, you go 5 wide, and you go 4 wide, and if you're going to run it, you spread them out and see if you can lighten up the box a little bit.
So are the
Was interesting.
struggles? Yeah,
Interesting. I'm going to just add a little bit more here. So Florida State had 3 power runs. That's a distance of, I think it's like two yards.
2 or less. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 or less. They had 3 power run attempts against Clemson. They converted on all 3 of them. You think of the one was the fullback. I think LT had one, and then there was another one. They had 7 runs, 22% of their runs of 32, 22% of 32 runs on the night. So 7 out of 32 were stuffed for no yards or less than. They had 9 runs that were stopped for 2 yards or less. So 0 or less, 2 or less. 16 of your 32 runs, or half of your runs, were stopped for 2 yards or less on the night. And I love that we're so happy about the run game, and it's great that they ran for 200 yards. But again, I think those kind of numbers point to when Clemson was willing to let you run the ball with numbers in the box, you were successful. When Clemson said no, you were not successful.
That's true. I'd like to know how many times they ran a light box against other opponents that they played because of how good their defensive
All right,
line is.
I've got Wake Forest here for you.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see.
27 rushes against Wake Forest. They were 1 for 1 on power runs, 6 stuff runs, 12 stopped runs. So 6 runs of 0 or less, 12 runs of 2 or less. So 18 of 27 went for 2 or less yards.
So yeah, here's another stat that kind of solidifies that. Florida State is 98th in yards per carries less than 3 yards. Or sorry, yards per runs where they were contacted. So yards before contact is less than 3. So that means that while they're getting decent yards per carries because they're getting these explosive runs, 65% of the runs on the season, they're getting contacted before 3 yards.
Right, getting hit in the backfield, and they're making some guys miss, which I think you guys can all see with the eye test. Guys like Trayshawn Ward, get healthy, big dog, miss you. Jordan Travis, all those guys. Trey Benson a little bit more now. But, yeah, it's just not a very super efficient running game. It is racking up the yards, and it does have the ability to be explosive. However, it's not getting you a ton of points because teams are playing 2 back over the top to stop you from getting 6 because they know when they get in the red zone, they can put the clamps down on you.
Right.
So going back to the statement, those issues that I think are pretty black and white, that once things get tough, things get compressed, teams want to stop the run and they know it's coming, they usually stop it. Can those issues in the red zone and short down and distances, do you think that they can be alleviated in the next 5 games? Do you think we're going to see an improvement in those numbers?
All right. So I'm gonna be wishy-washy on this one. I'm gonna say
you got to be again.
Well, here's why: because I don't think you're going to see a defense as good as Clemson, NC State. You know what I mean? But no, I don't think they're going to get drastically improved.
Okay, that's not wishy-washy. I think that is so. The myth or whatever the statement that it's going to get better, you are saying that's fiction. We're busting that. We think it's going to be a weakness for Florida State's offense.
I think there will be a level of improvement, but not some significant jump.
They won't end at 105.
I think there's some folks
105 or whatever. Yeah.
No, I don't. I think there's some folks out there that think because they ran for 206 yards on Clemson that now all of a sudden this is an elite running game. Anytime, anywhere, it doesn't matter. I think that's completely false.
Okay. What do you think, Kevin? Do you agree with Adam? Do you think it's going to either not improve or just improve slightly? Or do you think that Florida State's going to really be able to have a bounce back on this back part of their schedule?
Yeah, I think it's gonna improve. I think it's hard because a lot of the run per play metrics and stuff like that aren't going to get better, but I think they'll have more success in the red zone. I don't necessarily think that teams will have better clamps on them. I think the staff has now kind of sees what teams are going to do to them. I would hope that they kind of adjust to this. I think they'll find more success. I personally just because they won't have Clemson and NC State level defenses like AB was saying, but yeah, I don't think that they're going to just be an elite offense out of the blue at converting in red zone and third down conversions. I think they're gonna. I think it's hard because Norvell has been trying to get a little creative with it, and people get frustrated when these creative play calls don't work, right? So when they
talk
try to
out
get
of their ass, that's what they do.
they what?
People talk out of their ass. That's what they do.
So
Yeah,
you're
they get
saying,
upset, but Florida State's not successful. Florida State has not been able to run on teams when they know they're running, and that's why they get cute with things. That's why they feel like they have to do things like put Wyatt Rector at quarterback or hand the ball off to DJ Lundy or do toss plays on the goal line. It's because they genuinely have the metrics that say you can't just line up and run against Clemson or NC State.
okay, so you're kind of more of the opinion with Adam that it's going to get better just due to level of competition, but it's still going to be a huge weakness. It's probably the biggest weakness of this offense, right?
Yeah, probably. But I think that you'll see those. You're no longer. I think it's a black and white situation, right? With these short runs, it's black and white. Either that defensive line wins or the offensive line wins. I think you're just going to see the offensive line win a lot more going forward, and so that'll make those metrics look better. But
It's not going to be some massive leap.
yeah,
Gotcha.
I think you'll still see a fair amount of losses.
Okay, fair. Last one. Jordan Travis has been having some mechanics issues for the past 3 or 4 games. Fact or fiction?
I don't have a lot of stuff on this, but fiction.
You don't think it's been as far as like some of the struggles that he's had? What do you think that that's mostly due to? Coming back from health or?
I think they're playing better defenses.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that teams are playing two shell and a lot of zone and saying, run the football. You're not going to throw on us. You're not going to throw into tight windows because you're not that kind of quarterback. And he struggled with it.
Kev,
we've been pointing that out on film review over and over and over again the last 3 weeks. I mean, teams are just dropping 8 and saying, come get some.
Which is tough for anybody,
Absolutely.
anybody to complete in the country.
Yeah.
Jordan, even with his, I think is pretty easy to tell, like his pretty solid improvement from year to year.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you agree with that? Do you think it's mostly just he's having a little bit of level of success, kind of regressing to the mean a little bit, and it's mostly due to how the defenses have been playing him? Or do you think that there's some underlying mechanical issue?
Yeah, so let's see if I can't find a stat here real quick to kind of to justify my answer here, because I would agree with AB that teams are in general challenging Jordan Travis to throw the ball more. I think early on they are maybe kind of opposite, challenging Florida State to run on them. Yeah, so game 1, LSU blitzed on 64% of dropbacks. Yeah, and you've seen just a steady decline. So LSU was 64%, and then like Louisville was 40%. Who was after the Louisville game?
Boston College.
Boston College was 53%, but then you see Wake Forest only blitzed 16% of the time.
Right, because they were winning with her. That's when the offensive line was really unhealthy.
Yeah.
That's what they were just winning with 4, that wide 9, as Adam and you guys pointed out. They started to get that on film. So I'm with you. And that's really where Jordan was dinged up against Boston College. I didn't think he looked sharp early, but that Wake Forest game is when you saw like, oh, this is the blueprint to make Florida to really finally put a roadblock in front of a Florida State offense that was performing at a pretty high level before that.
Right.
I think you're also seeing the wide receivers aren't helping him out much. If I were to blame one position group for the NC State loss, it'd be wide receivers. They dropped 5 or 6 third and fourth downs conversions that were huge for that game. They dropped a touchdown that would have won the game. So I think you have seen the wide receivers kind of come back to earth. I think they were kind of playing out of their minds early on in the season. And Jordan Travis has looked a little bit less consistent, but I thought that going into the season, I defended Jordan Travis, saying I thought he was a top 15, top 20 quarterback with his legs and his arm. And then he came out and he played like a top 10 quarterback for a few weeks. And people were like, where did this Jordan Travis come from? Well, he's always been there. That Jordan Travis exists always when the running game's working and when receivers are catching the football. He's gonna kind of get happy feet and throw one or two bad passes a game. He's generally not terribly risky with his throws, but yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily see this as Jordan Travis regressing or being much of a worse quarterback, more than teams have been able to get away with blitzing less, keeping people in coverage, and shutting down FSU's offense. It's hard to throw into that kind of coverage. And so I think AB's right. It's not the kind of quarterback Jordan Travis is. And I think early on they thought that they could convince the world that he was that kind of quarterback. And you could when teams were blitzing you. But now you're going to have to run the ball with him to kind of force defenses out of coverages.
I think here's a good illustration of what's going on. They were facing they faced 21% man against LSU, 18 against Louisville, 36 against BC, and then 25, 22, and 7.9% against Clemson. But they've started to see 71.4%, 74.6%, and 75% zone coverages over the last 3 weeks, when the first 4 weeks were all in the 60%. We're seeing a lot more zone coverage. We're seeing a lot more, like Kev was talking about, a lot more just straight four-man pressures, as opposed to, let me see if I can pull this up here.
Well, those blitz percentages that Kevin was talking about earlier, right?
Yeah. The time to pressures come down. Time to throw has actually gone up. But his pressures, he was pressured 15, 12, 13, 11, 17 against Clemson. Oh, this is weird. Pressure percentage is going down, but his time to pressure has gone up, or is going down also. His time to pressure is going down also. So he's getting pressured. He's not able to hold on to the ball as long, but he's getting pressured less. But teams are playing more zone against them also. So,
and the wide receivers are dropping it more.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. We've seen a bit of a regression back to 2021 with the wide receiver play, but I think Jordan also has made some ill.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a mechanical thing. I think he's made some poor decisions. I thought that the 4th and 2 decision last week against Clemson was the right one. He didn't make a good decision on where to put the ball.
He didn't execute it correctly.
Yeah, he didn't execute it correctly. It wasn't a mechanical thing to me. It wasn't a pressure thing. I just don't think he threw the right ball. So I think his decision-making process has become more of an issue as opposed to his mechanical process.
So that myth is busted. And I think, just to kind of get out of here before people want to drive their car off a bridge right now, Florida State is 4-3. And I think one thing that is promising is that I think Florida State kind of fell into a rut with how they were attacking defenses against NC State and Wake Forest. And you didn't see that versus Clemson at all. A lot of variety, a lot of things to help out his quarterback, a lot of things to get that defense on the back foot, so they couldn't just sit back there with all those guys and clog up every single passing lane. Florida State was very exotic, and I think that can continue. And I think luckily that myth is busted, because it's not a mechanics thing. It's just a quality of competition thing. And then a very good player having a couple off days. So I think he can bounce back from it. So I think that myth is busted. Guys, I think that we have taken a plethora of conversations, and I think some we've busted, some we've confirmed, and a lot we talked about for a while, and I don't think we got anywhere, which is normally, I mean, it's to me, that means that it's something that we're going to continue to grapple with as the season continues. So do you have any other final thoughts before we get out of here? And then I guess Kevin's going to have to start getting his preview ready for an actual honest to goodness FSU football game.
I think this conversation played out exactly like the season has played out so far. This is a decent to good football team that's had some injuries at key positions that have forced them to make changes schematically, that have forced other players to regress because the guys in front of them aren't playing as well as opposed to like last year. I think our wishy-washiness on some of these conversations are because of what's going on the field. And I think that's also why you're looking at like a 4-3 record right now for this team. They gave away a game, but they also got beat by two teams that were better than them. But I think ultimately, we kind of talked about with like the Reds and stuff. Do I think things are going to drastically improve? No. But I think the teams that they're going to play these next 5 games aren't as good as the 3 teams they just played. So I think we're going to see progression out of these guys because they're going to play teams that they're better than now. And if they don't, I think that's a big warning sign, a big red flag.
Totally agree. Kevin?
Yeah, I think I would agree with this. I think we can sit here and play this game, but as long as Amarian Cooper was hurt and Fabian Lovett was hurt and Jared Verse has been in and out of games, those are really the 3 linchpins at 3 very important position groups that kind of held this defense together. To me, the fact that this defense is almost on the same level as the defense last year, even with these injuries, is hard to swallow because you want to see improvement. But it's hard to make an absolute statement until they're given the chance to kind of prove themselves with a healthy roster. And it's possible that they don't get that all season and it looks bad. And it means that some of these coaches have to answer some of the hard questions that we're having trouble answering right now. But yeah, I think the money's made in the back half against the teams that you should be able to beat. So no one's talking about the Louisville game, which was arguably the worst defensive performance of the season. No one talks about that because you won the football game. And the same thing's going to hold true for the back half. If you can win these football games, people are going to forget about losing to Clemson.
Go and get them, boys. Go and get them so we can have a little bit more fun when we have these conversations. We like to have fun here on the Triple Option. So thank you guys for tuning in. Busted some myths, confirmed some myths, myth. I'll never say myth that much again unless you guys like the format of the episode. Then we'll do it as much as you want because we cater to you, the fans. We love you guys. Keep chopping on and screw you, Georgia Tech. Keep chopping.
Go